Ignoring gender norms can limit the effectiveness and impact of financial inclusion interventions, and in some cases, even have unintended negative consequences. I'm Antonie Koning, Gender Lead at CGAP, and today I will speak to you about a technical guide that CGAP recently published to help funders and market facilitators design interventions that address the gender gap and increase women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment by taking gender norms into account. We'll introduce the guide to you and then hear from AFR, a market facilitator in Rwanda, on how they're putting this guidance into practice. Gender norms are collectively held beliefs that are often a root cause influencing the behavior of all participants in the financial market system, resulting in the exclusion of women. One of the ways you can understand what gender norms are driving behavior is to get to the root causes of challenges experienced. You can do this by consistently asking why. Here you see an example of women unable to access credit for business. By asking why at each stage, you can conclude that a gender norm is at the root of the problem. Understanding gender norms and the way they influence the functioning of the financial market system, including the behaviors of women, financial service providers, regulators, and others, is critical for systematically and effectively designing interventions that increase women's financial inclusion and contribute to their economic empowerment. Based on that understanding, you can create a vision of the change that you would like to see and design interventions accordingly, considering gender norms and possibly helping to shift them. In our guide, we distinguish between two types of interventions. We argue that at a minimum, your intervention should be informed by the norms that are affecting demand, supply, and other functions in the market system, and take these norms into account to advance women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment. Whenever possible and desired, your intervention should help to shift harmful norms in favor of more gender equality. These are norm transformative interventions. Let me now hand over to Joanna Ledgerwood, who will speak with Agnes from AFR in Rwanda about why it is so important to understand gender norms and what they do to address these norms in Rwanda.
Thank you, Antonie, and welcome, Agnes. I'm really glad you're able to join us today.
Thank you, Joanna. It is a pleasure to be part of this conversation.
Okay, so I'd like to start by asking you why you think it's important for AFR to understand how gender norms affect women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment.
Let me start by saying that I'm privileged to be working in a market where financial inclusion gender gap is only 1%. Based on FinScope 2020 data, 92% of women are financially included compared to 93% of men. On the face of it, it might look like our work is done. However, we know that despite the small gap in access, women do not have the same opportunities as men to use and to benefit from financial services. We need to understand why. After all, half of the population is women. And if we don't understand the impact of the gender norms on women's experiences and capacities, our efforts to support inclusive growth are less effective. So to better understand the constraints women face, at AFR, we are in the process of completing a gender norms diagnostic to help us figure out how best to design effective norm-informed intervention to continue deepening financial inclusion.
Great. I'm so glad that AFR is looking at gender norms now. Though you haven't actually conducted the gender norms diagnostic yet, I'm wondering if you can just think back to some of the interventions and some of the work that AFR has done, and instances where women perhaps haven't benefited as much as men, or if they haven't participated as much, and where there might be gender norms that are influencing that.
Looking at some of our projects, as far as training is concerned, we noted that women participation tended to be lower compared to men. One potential explanation could be the gender norms, since women should prioritize home responsibilities. If the trainings are in the morning, that could even be more difficult for women, and they will end up missing out. Another example, in Rwanda, women have equal ownership of assets. However, due to ingrained social norms, some may not feel comfortable using these assets as collateral, for example. So we are really looking forward to concluding the gender norms diagnostic to ensure our future intervention are norm informed and in some cases norm transformative. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing those examples. They really demonstrate the importance of understanding gender norms and particularly in increasing women's financial inclusion. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time. I really look forward to continuing this discussion at the FinEquity 2021 annual meeting. So thank you, Agnes.
Thank you.